favorite question for people to ask during the ordination process is, what person from the Bible do you most identify with, especially in relation to your call to ministry? I often would answer this question, Moses. We continue this morning with our sermon series on Moses. Last week, Pastor Willis shared about the 5 courageous women who defied the Pharaoh's wishes so that Moses could live. And this week, our story is of Moses and the burning bush. There are many things about Moses that I identify with, and the first is actually in the part of Scripture that we skipped from last week to this week. After being nursed by his mother, Moses returned to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. Exodus chapter 2, verses 11 and 12 say, "One day, after Moses had become an adult, he went out among his people, and he saw their forced labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. He looked around to make sure no one else was there. Then he killed the Egyptian, and he hid them in the sand." Now, to clarify, I have not killed anyone. But I have shared Moses' anger and frustration towards injustice. This feeling in the gut that the way people are being treated is wrong. After Moses fled Egypt because Pharaoh found out about his crime, he came across a group of women being harassed by some shepherds. He came to their aid and made sure they were taken care of. Again, Moses encountered injustice and had compassion for those who were picked on, harassed, oppressed. The first time I remember experiencing harassment, I was in kindergarten at a magnet school in Mobile, Alabama. I was playing with a little black boy named Nathaniel Jackson, and we were made fun of for playing with each other because our skin colors were different. And even then, as a 5-year-old, I knew that it was wrong for people to be treated differently because of their skin color, so we were friends anyway. Later, on a high school spring break mission trip to Washington, D.C., we heard stories about how people became homeless. This one man shared that he had become homeless simply because he could not read. He had been cheated out of his home for $1. I was filled with anger, sorrow, and compassion for this man whom I had just met. It was in college that I learned about the Order of the Deacon, a clergy order in the United Methodist Church whose focus is on sharing compassion and working for justice, both in the church and in the community. When I first read about the ministry of the deacon, my whole life made sense in these words. Deacons have a heart for those who are ostracized by society, who are mistreated, unloved, and broken. Deacons organize the church for service in the world and help people discover their passions and connect them with how they might serve in the community. We lead worship, we teach, we equip others for ministry. We develop partnerships in the community to discern the needs of the community so that we might show God's love in ways that make sense. We have one foot in the church and one foot in the community and seek to bridge the gap between the two. It took me 10 years to get through the ordination process, in part because, like Moses, I constantly questioned God and questioned my call. One of my favorite parts of this passage is the but Moses said, because he keeps coming back and asking, who am I, God? Me? I can't talk good. I'm not eloquent. Surely there's someone else that's better suited for this. It reminds me of when I compare myself to others and think about how much better they are than I am at things that I'm not good at, like decorating or cooking or being tactful. Moses even pleads with God, please choose someone else. It reminds me of times when I often cried out to God, can I just be a math teacher? But I finally made it to the last Board of Ordained Ministry meeting to be fully ordained. In our orientation meeting, they encouraged us to get a hotel room the night before the interview so that we would not have travel anxiety and we'd get there on time and we'd get a good night's sleep. So I did. I checked into my hotel room, I brought my journal and my ordination papers, and I spent several hours in prayer and reflection. And I went to sleep that night feeling ready, confident, and at peace. I woke up feeling rested, not quite sure what time it was. So I looked over at the clock and I saw that it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, oh, okay, I have a couple more hours, so I'll feel extra rested. So I turned over to go back to sleep, but then I heard a pop, and I saw the clock flicker out. And I thought, okay, the power must have gone out. And so I rolled over and went back to sleep. But then I saw, before I could get back to sleep, that there was a glow coming from the bathroom. I had left the light on because I was alone in a hotel room, but the power was out. So I got out of bed to go see what the glow might be. As I came up to the bathroom door, there was a fire, a little bigger than the size of a microwave, a roaring fire above the toilet in the bathroom. I looked around to see what I might use to put the fire out, and I quickly realized that I couldn't find anything, so I shut the door to the bathroom. I went around the room and I gathered my things as best I could in the dark, and I threw them out in the hallway. I ran downstairs to the front desk, and I said, "There's a fire in my hotel room." And the woman at the receptionist desk sleepily replied, "I'll call maintenance." And I'm like, no, like there's a fire in my hotel room, in my bathroom. So we ran upstairs and she started knocking on doors. And it was then that I realized the fire alarm was not going off. So we knocked on doors and we had to evacuate the entire hotel. And so I put on my clothes, I gathered my things and took them to my car. And as about 100 people come out of the hotel, I'm thinking to myself, what have I done? Am I going to get in trouble? I wonder what's going to happen next. Just then, about 5 or 6 fire trucks pull in to the hotel parking lot, and these fully dressed firemen start running up towards my room. And as quickly as they came up, they came back down. The fire chief took my statement, the EMT took my vitals, and I asked for my toiletries back so that I could at least brush my teeth before my interview, which was going to happen in a few hours. They sent us back to our rooms, and I got a new room because mine was full of smoke and ash. And I began to wash off my toiletries in my new room. They were gross, covered in black, wet. And so I'm washing off my toiletries, and these are the words that came to me from Isaiah 43, and they came to me in this way. When you walk through the fire, I will be with you, and the flames, they will not overcome you. Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name, you are mine. For I am the Lord your God, I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. I am the Lord, I am the Lord, for I am the Lord. I laughed at the irony of these words coming to me, and I cried tears of gratitude that I'm a light sleeper, because for years I had complained about not being able to sleep through anything, but it was because I was a light sleeper that I woke up and realized something was wrong. In that moment, as I heard these words and sang them over and over, I felt God saying to me, "Do not fear, for I am with you in this moment, and I will be with you whatever fires come your way. I have called you by name. You are mine." God called out to Moses, Moses, Moses. God called out to Samuel in the middle of the night. God called out to David while he was tending his sheep. Jesus called out to Mary and Martha and Lazarus and his disciples, each by name. And God has called each of you by name as well. In Adam Hamilton's book about Moses, he writes that God's usual way of working in the world to alleviate suffering, injustice, and pain is not to intervene miraculously, suspending the laws of nature, violating the principle of human freedom, or sending angels to make things right. No, God works through people. God sees, hears, and knows the suffering of others. God expects us to do the same. God's response is to call each of us by name. Our task is to pay attention to the burning bush, the whisper of the Spirit, the nudging inside. It may not be a literal fire that the way that God calls people can be through scripture or song lyrics or silence or through other people. Moses was uniquely suited for leading the Israelites out of Egypt. He knew the language. He had compassion for his fellow Hebrews. He wasn't the most skilled or the most courageous, but ultimately he was willing to trust in God and follow when God called his name. I wonder, how is God calling your name? I wonder, what are you uniquely gifted to do to respond to the needs and suffering of the world? Like Moses, we can name every excuse in the book. But I'm busy. I'm tired. I've done my time. I'm not good enough. Surely, God, there's someone else that you can call to do this. And we also choose to ignore God's call, assuming someone else will step up. I'm reminded of this song by Matthew West called Do Something. Here are the lyrics. I woke up this morning, saw a world full of trouble, thought how we'd ever get so far down, and how is it ever going to turn around? So I turned my eyes to heaven. I thought, God, why don't you do something? Well, I couldn't bear the thought of people living in poverty, children sold into slavery. The thought disgusted me. So I shook my fist at heaven, said, God, why don't you do something? God said, I did. I created you. The second verse says, I'm so tired of talking about how we are God's hands and feet, but it's so easier to say than to be. Live like angels of apathy who tell ourselves, it's all right, somebody else will do something. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of life with no desire. I don't want a flame, I want a fire. And I want to be the one who stands up and says, I'm going to do something. In the midst of Moses' excuses, he asks God, who are you anyway? Who should I tell sent me? God says, I am. Tell them, I am sent you. Repeatedly throughout Scripture, God encourages people with the phrase, be not afraid. Do not be afraid. Do not fear. God said, I am the Lord. I am the Lord. I am the Lord. No matter how you say it, it has power. Because God's love and grace are bigger than our excuses. They're bigger than our mistakes. And they're bigger than our fires. Whatever fires you are walking through, know that God is with you. Whatever God has called you to do, you don't have to be strong or sure or right or have it all together. Simply know that God will give you what you need. Do not fear, God says. I have called you by name. You are mine.